Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Hello. Boker Tov, as we say in Hebrew. This is this is a it's a beautiful morning here today. At least I haven't gone outside too much yet, but it looks like a nice day. Did everyone see Saturn and Jupiter yesterday?
Yes, I did.
I did not have a good view of it.
Oh,
It was right behind your house.
It was
Our
right,
point.
right behind my house. Yes, it's true. It was behind my house, but I couldn't see it because of the hillside. So I had to kind of walk around but
Yeah, up in the hill, we had a great view.
really?
Yeah.
That's good. We didn't, but I have this really cool app on the phone on my iPad now called Skyview. Skyview. I don't have the paid version of it, but with Skyview, you hold it up and it's like a AR augmented reality thing where it shows you where the different constellations and planets are. And it's really cool because it just overlays it, and then you can search too. You can say like type in Saturn and it'll take you to where it is. So you just type in where your coordinates are, or actually you don't type it and it finds you. It's crazy, but it's a really cool app.
oh,
It's called Skyview. I have Skyview Lite. I guess you can pay for the upgraded version, which has I guess other features and stuff, but for an amateur like me, it's very, very good. Don Kogan isn't on. Don's part of the astronomy club, the local astronomy club. So I think they probably knew what they were doing. I'm sure they didn't do anything with, I shouldn't say I'm sure, but I doubt they did anything with the public like they usually do in the park. But yeah, Saturn was probably there's a theory that Saturn was a big planet for the ancient world and maybe for the Jewish people in particular, because it was associated with Saturday, Shabbat. So it's possible that there were people that were a little too into astronomy that were, I don't know if worshiping Saturn is the right way to say it, but definitely giving it too much priority, if you will. So
That was what in the Middle Ages.
Before that, even before.
Really? Because it wasn't Saturn until it was named Saturn then.
No, it's been Saturn. I'll tell
it's
you.
one of the ancient planets.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Saturn. There's This is not the book that I'm looking for. I have it. I'm not going to go get it, but yeah. Let's see. It's called Saturn and the Jews. So part of the problem was it could be that the Jews kind of had that thrown on them because in the ancient world, I'm talking about pre-Roman, we wouldn't have necessarily known about Saturn being Saturday, but the Jewish Society of the Talmudic period recognized the association and referred to Saturn as Shabtai, which is the Hebrew word for obviously Shabbat. They refer to the planet as Shabtai, the star of Shabbat. Greek and Arab astrology, however, considered Saturn to be the most malignant of the seven planets, and thus the Jews astrologically governed by Saturn, were considered to be contaminated by the planet's wicked nature. Ibn Ezra, who is one of the great commentary writers, Spanish rabbi Ibn Ezra, also a poet. He was the first Jewish thinker to deal with the problematic link between Saturn, and the Jews. He addresses the astrological association throughout his writings, both scientific and non-scientific. He removes the sting of this embarrassing linkage by stressing that Saturn is actually conducive to a Jew's religious faith. Ibn Ezra associates Saturday with the fourth commandment, ordaining one to remember the Sabbath day, and explain this correspondence allows the Jews. So Ibn Ezra's belief was that because we keep the Shabbat, Saturn doesn't have any malignant effect on us. So he didn't deny that Saturn has a malignant effect, but he just said that because we keep Shabbat, Saturn's evil forces stay away from us. There you go.
And just to let you know, Saturn was discovered in 1610.
It's not
As a planet, but maybe it was seen as an earthly, as a heavenly body.
It's too big in the sky, like for people not to know it. So they called it.
But it wasn't named until 1610, Saturn.
I think that means it's like not named the planet. They didn't call it a planet. I'm telling you, in the ancient world, where's that on Wikipedia or something? Is that on Wikipedia?
No, I got it somewhere else.
So
Galileo named him.
The moons maybe, and the rings, but
it says here, I'll tell you, in the ancient world.
because it was one of the 5 ancient planets.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's called Saturn. I mean, that's why they named it after the god, because Saturn is the most distant of the 5 planets easily.
No, I was wrong. It's been, it was looked at a telescope at first in 1610.
Yeah, with his
That
telescope.
makes sense.
Wait, hold on a second. Yeah,
So it's been thousands of years, like you said.
So the reason that Saturn is seen as a kind of an evil thing is because of its the way that it rotates. It has an eccentric orbit, and I think the eccentric orbit freaked people out and gave people a sense that it kind of did its own thing, which, by the way, is not a bad. We would not necessarily say that's a bad thing anymore, but it's definitely a Jewish thing. But anyways, so that was a little bit about Saturn. So yeah. Anyways, there's a cult. There's Shabtai Tzvi, who was the Jewish false messiah of the 1600s. Essentially was named after the planet, and so some people thought that was a good omen, a bad omen, a scary omen. But Shabtai was, I mean, he was connected to the planet as well. So again, it's an interesting. I'm interested in Judaism and astronomy and astrology / astrology. So this Saturn, there might be if I ever do a book, there might be a chapter on Saturn, just to summarize everything that's been written about it, because there's a decent amount. Anyways, so a couple people have asked whether we're going to be opening our synagogue now that the Supreme Court has ruled that it's okay for us to meet. And so far, I haven't had one person demand that we, or not even demand, but suggest that we go back into services inside. And
That's because your congregation isn't stupid.
Sorry.
I've talked with some colleagues, and I was going to ask Reverend Lynn, what is the direction that the Episcopal Church is giving people right now?
No. Outside, small groups, no singing, no praying together. I mean, why bother? Let's Zoom it.
Yeah,
I mean, the restrictions inside a church for a meeting are unbelievable.
Yeah.
And It's just not, it's not worth it.
Well, they're not complying, and the mainline churches seem to be following that advice. The Episcopal, Methodist, most of the Presbyterians, most of the churches that we would recognize as responsible partners in creating a safe world. But
Oh,
there's some
you have
churches
a
that are doing some
silver
really
tongue.
things. I've been watching some of their videos and some of their explanations for why they're doing this, and yeah, I mean, some of the churches are not. I'm talking about in California, are not even requiring masks. They won't require them. They won't require people to wear masks. They say it's up to you. It's a personal decision. So
Ugh.
I don't understand the logic with that. I can almost understand their logic that, you can't close churches and keep strip clubs open. I mean, that was the argument.
Well, yeah,
Aren't they the same for some people?
But
of course they are.
but
They're both obviously required, very necessary.
but the thing that was strange is I'm pretty sure. I mean, I don't know. I don't think that there's any strip clubs in Santa Clarita, but no, there's not. But I don't think they're. I think
They're at the back of churches.
I think you probably have to.
Churches pay their bills,
I
right?
think you probably have to wear a mask in those places, but I don't know. It was very strange. Very strange that they were telling people that they didn't have to wear masks, even inside. Anyways, if you don't, I mean, it's happening here. I mean, it's happening when they wrote the article yesterday in the Signal about what different places are doing. Some of the places admitted that they're not complying. I mean, I don't understand how you on record tell people you're not complying with the law.
Well, because there is no enforcement. I mean,
Grace
who's going to
Baptist,
enforce it?
which was trying to say that they're trying to comply or being responsible, they said, well, we were only not in compliance 1 week, which is a weird thing to say. I guess they started going back earlier than the Supreme Court decision. I guess they thought that it would happen or whatever. I don't know. But why would you even say that I mean, why admit that you were not in compliance? It doesn't make any sense, but I guess they don't care. I mean, it's obvious they don't care, but I was shocked. And then Crossroads Church said that they don't care. They've been doing it since August. I mean, they flat out said we've been having services indoors since August. And I rode past on my bike a couple of weeks ago, and I saw they had an outside tent set up. So I guess they had a tent set up and still wanted to do services inside. I maybe the outside tents were to make people think they were doing services outside. But I drove by on a Sunday. I rode by my bike, and I just turned in there because I have some feelings about that building on Rye Canyon, and so I always kind of like check to see what's going on. And yeah, it was weird because they had a tent set up for several hundred people, and I couldn't tell whether they had services in there or not, but I saw people going in and out of the building. So it kind of makes sense that they maybe put up the tent so people would think they had outdoor services, or maybe
Are they
they had
going to be
overflow.
singing?
Maybe they had overflow.
Are they going to sing?
I don't know. I don't know. Why would they care? They were doing services indoors when they weren't supposed to for the last 6 months. So I don't know why they would care whether they were singing or not. They don't care. They were not in compliance just by doing that. So yeah, most people would say that it's not nice to jeopardize people's health. And David Haig, who's the pastor of Grace Baptist, said he had. I mean, he actually said he had a moderate case of it. So I don't know. By the way, I just want to put out there that I think so far, not that I'm bragging or anything, but I think I'm the only rabbi in Santa Clarita who hasn't had COVID. But I'm not bragging. I'm not asking for it. but I am the only one who hasn't had it yet so far. So, or maybe I did and I didn't know. I've never been to, I didn't have a test. So maybe I did. I could be walking around in denial or not denial, but
Asymptomatic.
asymptomatic and very, very arrogant that I didn't have it. But okay. I mean, look, my main thing is I just don't want to get anybody else sick. So I'm less concerned. I don't think I'm at risk, but anyways, we're gonna get started, and at least for the time being, we'll see people on this screen, which, you know, look, there's advantages to it, as we've talked about, and there is the ability to do some stuff with the multimedia, and, you know, bringing in people from out of town, and just a lot of good things. So, but it is not, we would like to see you and be able to wish you a good 2021 in person, and be able to give people hugs and comfort each other. And but we do have quite a few people that are fighting COVID now. Most of them are not in the hospital. A couple of them have been hospitalized at Henry Mayo, but we're also praying for people dealing with other illnesses. So with that, hope that come to an end to this soon. And we're going to post up our text for today. And Rosemary, how are you feeling?
I'm good, thanks.
Excellent. Well, if you wouldn't mind, we're going
No, I can read.
to have you continue the reading. Let me just get this over here for Rosemary. Where we left off last time was that Moses is going to go to Egypt, but he well, actually, we haven't gotten there yet because he's still arguing with God. We're at the point where
Get out.
is it the burning bush, chapter 4, and wow. So we're going to take a look here, and that's what we read last week. So let's go a little bit further here. But Moses punished for his stubbornness. And as we know, Moses did not take up this mission without a whole lot of arguing. Let me just actually do something real quick. I just want to show everybody what we're talking about here, which is what he says, right? Which is, what if the people don't believe me, but say the Lord did not appear to you? So what if they just call into question whether I was actually called by you? So we're going to get through this series of challenges. So wait, hold on a second.
He just said, yeah, wasn't crying. He just said,
Because that's usually.
You see it? Is it up there?
Yes.
Exodus. Okay. So we're going to have a couple of ways for Moses to deal with this. The first is to show the miracles. And there's 3 miracles, and the Midrash is going to deal with those. And God actually says if they don't pay attention to the miracle, they'll pay attention to the next one, and they'll pay attention to the next one. They will eventually pay attention to it.
smiling too.
And then he said to him, then Moses says to God, but I'm
Are you muted?
slow of speech and slow of tongue. I can't speak very well.
Ooh.
God says, you don't think I know what you can do, right? That's the second issue. Then the third issue is, the third time he said, and so God says, I'll tell you what to say. Yeah, I know you know, okay, fine. I know what you can do. I know. But then finally Moses says, please, Lord, make someone else your agent. So he first says, what if they don't believe me? Then he says, I'm not very good at talking. And then he finally says, pick somebody else. And at that, it says that the Lord became angry with Moses. And he said, there is your brother Aaron the Levite. He, I know, speaks readily. Even now he is setting out to meet you. He will be happy to see you. So we're going to take it up from there. And we are going to now look at the text. I just did that so that you can see that there is not one, not two, but three times that Moses says no. But let's see. So now again, you might have remembered it, but I want you to see it. We may go back and look at it again so you can see why the Midrash does what it does. But I think that gives you a little basis, a little background for this. So here we go. Rosemary, take it away.
I need the text.
Oh, it's not up?
No, I'm
No, we have to
looking at
double-
the Torah.
Huh. Is it there now?
Nope.
Okay, hold it. It says it's there, but it's not there. So hold it 1 second. And it's there now?
Not yet.
It's thinking.
It's thinking. Da, 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 da.
Yes?
No, it says Mark Blazer has started screen sharing, but there's no.
Okay, hold it 1 second. Let me just, in this time of,
It's Zoom grand.
yeah, this is not me. Hold it 1 second. We're just gonna try it one more time.
Good morning, everyone.
Hey there. Good morning. Okay, here we go. I'm letting some more people in. And how are we doing now?
Still Mark Blazer has started screen sharing, but no screen.
Okay, because it says I'm screen sharing.
Yes, it says you are, but there's no.
Okay, hold it 1 second.
He's very friendly. He's sharing. It's just not what he thinks he's sharing.
Hold it. No, well, that would be embarrassing. That'll happen one day, eventually. Hold it 1 second.
Yes, it's like the landing gear on the airplane. There's only people who have forgotten it and people who will forget it.
Eesh. I don't like that story, Rosemary. That story scares me. I don't like that. That story I don't want to hear about. Okay, let's try one more time. Yeah, the problem was this happened. Now?
Screams. Nope.
Nope.
Okay. Let me try this. Okay, how about
Nope.
how about now?
Not now. Now we have press ask or double click.
Mm,
No.
Hate it
Oh.
when that happens.
okay, how about now? Still not there.
No,
Still not there.
it's not there.
Okay, I have a green line around my thing. It says it's sharing.
It says you started screen sharing, but there's nothing shared.
Okay, so hold it.
Ah,
Yay.
There it is.
there it is.
Okay,
Yay, yay.
you have to have a little patience, I guess.
Yes.
All right, so here's Moses punished for his stubbornness. I guess that kind of gives away what's going to happen. All right.
In spite of all these safeguards, Moses was not yet ready to accept the mission God wishes to impose upon him. He persisted in urging his fears, saying, "But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken to my voice, for they will say, 'The Lord has not appeared to you.' And the Lord said to him, 'What is that in your hand?' And he said, 'A rod.' And the Lord said, 'You deserve to be castigated with it. If you did not intend to take my mission upon yourself, you should have said so in the beginning. Instead, you held back with your refusal until I revealed to you the great secret of the ineffable name, that you might know it if the children of Israel should ask you concerning it. And now you say, I will not go. Now, therefore, if you will not execute my charge to you, It will be executed by this rod. It was my wish to distinguish you and make you my instrument for doing many miracles. But you deserve a punishment for having suspected my children of lack of faith. The children of Israel are believers and sons of believers, but you will show yourself of little faith in your career, and as you follow the example of the slanderous serpent, so shall you be punished with leprosy, as the serpent was punished.
Wow. So this is a weird midrash, because it's Moses. I mean, God really gets mad at Moses now, and it seems like what he gets mad about is that Moses kind of played along that he was going to do it, and now is backing off. So it seems as though God kind of holds Moses responsible for playing a trick on him. I mean, literally, like that Moses, that Moses is, that Moses is started the negotiation and then is backing out now. And God is saying, you can't do that. Because in chapter 3, God, when Moses says, what should I tell people you're called? And he says, that's when God says, hey, yeah, sure, yeah, this is my name. So originally Moses says in chapter 3, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and free the Israelites? And he says, I'll be with you. And then he says, who shall I say is doing it? So the rabbis are picking up on something here, which is that there seems to be like two versions of this story, which they're very well, you can make the argument there are two versions of the story by two different authors. But rather in the course of saying that, they're saying, well, why do we have this stop and start where it seems like Moses is going to do it and now he's not going to do it? So it's basically, this Midrash puts those two stories together and says that Moses did something really bad here, that he gets from God the secret of God's name, and now is backing out after getting that information, which is strange. You think, like, what's the big deal about doing that? But basically, Moses gets the secrets of God from God and then is like, nah, you know what? I'm not going. And God's not going to have any of it. And as a matter of fact, God's saying, all those miracles that I was going to do with you, that rod is now going to be doing them. Now, they picked up on the fact that God says to Moses, pick up that rod, that's going to become a snake. But they looked at it as almost as if they're saying, no, that rod is now, because you doubted me and because you doubted yourself, that rod's now going to be the way I do my miracles. So some of the power of what you have is now in that rod, and that rod is now, the staff is now the miracle staff, and you're not the miracle. And of course, they notice that it turns into a snake. So that's interesting, because the snake connected to the skin, losing its skin, connected to the other miracle that Moses has. Remember, Moses has 3 miracles in his bag of tricks. He's got the rod, he's got his hand that he sticks into his clothes, comes out with leprosy, and then puts it back in and doesn't have leprosy. Well, does he have leprosy or skin disease, or does he not? The fact is that the rabbis take away from this that maybe that's not, like, that's a miracle, but that's like a miracle you don't want to have. Hey, look, sometimes I have skin disease and sometimes I don't. So they look at it as actually a kind of a punishment, that is one of the things. The last thing is pour out a little bit of the Nile and it turns to blood. So those are the 3 things that Moses has, and he can do at any time. So like, if somebody says to Moses, hey, show me that, how do I know you're the guy? Oh, here, I'll do one of these things. So those are the things that Moses can do. according to the Torah. That's the Torah says that. The Midrash is now maybe upholding the idea that these are not such great miracles. And of course, the rod, as it also says, is going to essentially be part of your downfall too, which is that, again, when Moses strikes the rock with the rod, it's Moses's weakest point. So let's look at the Midrash as it continues.
You need to scroll up. Thanks. The Lord now bade Moses put his hand into his bosom and take it out again. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous, as white as snow. And God bade him put his hand into his bosom again, and it turned again as his other flesh. Besides being a chastisement for his hasty words, the plague on his hand was to teach him that as the leper defiles, so the Egyptians defiled Israel. And as Moses was healed of his uncleanness, so God would cleanse the children of Israel of the pollution the Egyptians had brought upon them.
Yeah. So that's a little bit more about the skin disease not being such a great miracle, but it's also a lesson. Now, you remember, I showed you a few weeks ago, it was actually the week that Rosemary and Judith were not there. So I read and I took you through not just the Midrash, but actually also Josephus. What was interesting about Josephus and Philo is that they write in their time, 2,000 years ago, against Egyptians, Greek Egyptians, but Egyptians, people living in Egypt, historians who said that Moses was actually a leper who took other lepers out of Israel and out of Egypt and brought them to Israel. That this was like a leper revolt or a leper. It's just a bunch of gross people leaving Egypt. That's who the Jews were. That's why they left, because the Egyptians didn't like leprosy, and these people all had it, and they all left. Now, clearly, it was an anti-Semitic propaganda piece that these guys wrote. Again, one of the writers was named Appian, and one of them was named Manetho. These Egyptian anti-Semitic writers. But what was interesting is that they seem to have been basing their lies, if you will, on these kernels of stories within the Torah, and even more so within the Midrash. That, okay, Moses might not have had leprosy, but he had like a little leprosy. He had it on his hand, and I mean, once you have it, even if you can make it go away, you have it. So here the Midrash seems to be a little less, oh, wow, what a great miracle it is, as maybe a little bit, that's what you get for not believing in yourself. That's what you get for not listening to God. That kind of miracle isn't such a great thing to have when your body is the thing that, is the demonstration material. So that's an interesting, yeah.
Did I understand that God gave the snake leprosy?
No. Well, God
Kind of sounded.
made snakes shed their skin. And so while that's not leprosy,
Takes care of
while
leprosy.
this isn't leprosy either, snakes slough off their skin because
Right.
it's kind of gross. I mean, look, you and I don't necessarily look at a snake and look at the skin and go, oh, that's gross. But some people do. Some people might say, oh, that's disgusting. The snake leaves its whole skin behind. I mean, I think it's kind of weird. I mean, kind of cool, but it is strange, and it is not leprosy, but it is, it's a skin thing where your skin comes off. So they looked at it like, that's the snake, that's the plague, that's what snakes do, and that's not what you want to have. You don't want to have that kind of thing, even if it's a God-given miracle. So maybe that
miracle, that mini plague that he can do, was not great. Now remember, his sister Miriam gets struck with it too. And he prays and he heals her. But does Moses have this kind of disfiguring thing happening to him? Look, there's enough there that people would say about Moses later on that he had these skin diseases. We know that he wore a veil for the rest of his life after he came down from Mount Sinai. Now, it's always been kind of assumed that he comes back with rays of light coming off of his face. But that's not exactly what the Torah says. I mean, that's our kind of, it's a possible understanding, but it's another possible understanding that his face is disfigured. We usually say it's transfigured or it's made radiant, but it's also possible to read this Hebrew that he has like sores all over his face from coming into contact with God, that he's actually, I mean, the Torah says he has to wear a veil because the people are scared of it. Now, I guess you could say they could be scared that he's so powerful now, but it's also very possible that they looked at him and were scared by his face, that his face was so disfigured that people were like, put a veil on that. We can't look at it. I'm just saying these possibilities exist, and they exist in the Midrash. It's not just like our imagination of saying, well, this is what we say today, or what you know, an interesting reading about beauty and about you know, having some type of disfigurement or something, whatever you want to call it. I don't know even what the politically correct word is. The Midrash gives us these things. The Midrash gives us these things 2,000 years ago. So we're gonna, yeah, we have it. All right. Here's the other piece of this.
The second wonder, connected with the rod of Moses, likewise conveyed a double meaning in that it pointed to the coming redemption of Israel and taught Moses a specific lesson. At the bidding of God, Moses cast his rod on the ground and it became a serpent, to show him that when he introduced Israel, he was following the example of the abusive serpent, and also to show him that the great dragon that lies in the midst of the rivers of Egypt, though he was now hacking into Israel with his teeth, would be rendered harmless like the rod of wood, which has no power to bite.
Right. And so because one of Egypt's gods, Sobek, is, I mean, we would call it a crocodile, but it can be scary. I mean, there's crocodiles that are pretty frightening. But of course represented, you know, this god of Egypt, the Nile. Right now that God has power over us, but it's not going to have power over us longer. It's soon going to be like a floating rod of wood floating in the water. So if anyone's ever, you know, been to Florida and said, is that a gator or is that a piece of wood? That's what they're talking about. Soon that God is going to be like a piece of wood. So that rod that turns the serpent is like the Egyptian god Sobek, that's now going to be like a rod floating in the Nile. So.
And again, through the third miracle he was bidden to perform, God conveyed to Moses what would happen in the latter years of his own life. The sign he gave him was to make known to him that before the water came, blood would flow from the rock at Meribah, when Moses would strike it after uttering the hasty, impatient words that were destined to bring death down upon him.
And so here, the weird thing here about the last plague being turning the Nile to blood, they brought it back to Moses's striking the rock, water comes out, but their message was, the rabbi's message here was, the water that he's putting out of the Nile that turns to blood is a reminder, or is a message that his own downfall will be bringing forth water. That water will turn to blood, which is the blood of his death.
When he strikes that rock, when he's angry and mad at the people, that's blood too, his blood. Interesting little connection to Moses and water, his downfall, and what this miracle also does, which this last miracle, not a whole lot about turning the, but of course, that's just the first thing, which is Moses, here's some tricks that will make people believe you. It's what God says, essentially, right? You know, the people don't believe you do these things. Now the question is, how long does this negotiation go on for? Yeah, according to the Midrash, it didn't happen in an hour or so. Didn't happen in a day.
For 7 days, God urged Moses to undertake the mission he desired him to execute. He resorted to persuasion that the heathen men might not say that he abused his power as ruler of the world, forcing men to do his service against their will. But Moses remained obdurate. He could not be won over. He said, "You do a wrong to me in sending me to Pharaoh. In the palace of the Egyptian king, there are persons that know how to speak the 70 languages of the world. No matter what language a man may use, there is someone that understands him. If I should come as your representative and they should discover that I am not able to converse in the 70 languages, they will mock at me and say, 'Behold this man, he pretends to be the ambassador of the creator of the world, and he cannot speak the 70 languages.'" To this, God made reply as follows: "Adam, who was taught by none, could give names to the beasts in the 70 languages. Was it not I that made him speak?"
Yeah, so here's a midrash that explains what Moses was really meaning when he said he couldn't speak well. You know, we usually take away from the Torah that Moses just didn't speak very well, that Moses had a speech impediment, that Moses, so we had that midrash that we read about how Moses put the coal in his mouth and burned his tongue, and that's why he couldn't speak. The rabbis go a different way here, which is kind of an interesting psychological study on Moses and on anybody, maybe on themselves, I don't know. It's this idea that Moses, it wasn't Moses' speech that was the problem, but that he didn't speak enough languages, that he wasn't smart enough, that he didn't have enough knowledge. And what he says to God here essentially is that, look, the people in Pharaoh's court, they're really, really smart people. Like they speak all 70, there's people there that speak all 70 languages. Now, so in the ancient world, we've talked about it before, they had 70 nations. They felt there were 70 nations and each nation had its own language. And going back to the Tower of Babel and essentially if you knew all 70 languages, there was nothing else to know. It's strange, by the way, that knowing languages was considered to be like the mark of intelligence. It's really amazing. I mean, we would say we still have a little bit of that today. You know, we marvel at people who speak 4 or 5 languages. Actually, normally in America, we marvel at somebody who speaks 2 languages. But you know, but we still do marvel at somebody who can speak lots of languages, or if they know another language, all of a sudden we're like, wow, I especially if it's like a language that you don't expect them to speak, if they start busting out some language and you're like, oh my goodness, that guy's fluent in, Italian. I remember Kobe Bryant was raised in Italy. And so he spoke fluent Italian, and people would get, they'd be like, when he would break into Italian, people would be like, oh my gosh, that guy's speaking Italian. There's that kind of like, oh, that he must know, or she must know other stuff because they can speak those languages. And I think like the more obscure the language, like the smarter that person must be. So, especially if you speak like a dead language, if you speak Latin, you must be, really smart. But there is that, we still have that. Moses is saying, look, I'm going to go there and they're going to look at me and ask me to say things in different languages. And I don't know. I don't know these languages. I'm going to look like an idiot. And so God says to Moses, you'll be able to do that. So there's actually another miracle here that he's basically telling him that if I want you to speak in another language, you'll speak in that language. Why? Because Adam knew all those languages. He gave names to the animals in all 70 languages. Now that's kind of an interesting little midrash there, which we haven't read before, which is that Adam, as the progenitor of all humanity, knew all the languages that his descendants would speak, and so gave names to those animals. Like, essentially, where did those names come from? From Adam. That the languages themselves are like going back to the beginning, which then you wonder, well, in the Tower of Babel, that's when they start speaking all these different languages. But it seems to be that these languages are like predestined, that the languages of the world are made by God. There's meant to be a multiplicity of dialects, that it happens at Tower of Babel. We reach that realization, or that we fulfill that destiny of speaking those languages. But they were like, Adam spoke those languages. God knows those languages. The Torah is meant to be taught in 70 languages. And so, as strange as it is that like these languages go back to Adam, God says they're all my languages, and you'll know those languages. Don't worry about being caught off guard or being made to look stupid when you get to Pharaoh. Because just like Adam knew all those languages, and who told Adam? Who taught Adam? I taught Adam. Who was taught by none, right? Means nobody sat Adam down and said, here's the languages. I put it in his mind. It's amazing, because it basically means that God has put within the human mind the ability to do this. I mean, Adam could do it, and now Moses could. It's not like a normal thing. The Egyptians, maybe these people, they pride themselves on knowledge, then they teach it. They taught it. I mean, they teach it. The assumption here is God didn't put it in their minds, but God can put it in your mind. God can give you that knowledge. And so that's what Moses gets. He gets that intelligence, if you will, that super intelligence that he's going to have if he needs it. So that's another miracle that Moses gets. Not, again, that he's slow of speech, but that he can speak any language. And God will make that happen. However, not enough.
Moses was not yet satisfied. He continued to urge objections, and he said, O Lord of the world, you would charge me with the task of chastising Egypt and redeeming Israel, and I am ready to be your messenger. But is it seemly that a man should execute 2 errands at once? No, my Lord, for this 2 men are needed. God made answer and said, Moses, I know well whom you have in mind with your request to be your companion in the mission I assign to you. Know therefore that the Holy Spirit has already come upon your brother Aaron, and even now he is awaiting you on the way of Egypt. And when his eyes rest upon you, he will rejoice.
Yep. So that's an answer for why is Aaron going to be there. If you caught what just happened, Moses says, you're giving me 2 jobs. And that's too much for one man. I could redeem Israel, or I could chastise Egypt. I can't do both. That's a 2-man job. I can't do both of them. And God says, yeah, I knew you were going to say that. And Aaron is going to be there to help you. He's going to do part of the heavy lifting with you. Now, it's interesting because we read that Aaron comes there because Moses finally says, send somebody else. And God says, Aaron's coming to meet you to help. Aaron's clearly like the final thing. We're going to get to that because we're only just scratching the surface of the Aaron, why Aaron, and the Torah tells us Aaron. I mean, the Torah lays it out that Aaron is there with him right at the beginning, which we sometimes forget because in every movie version, Aaron is always a sidekick and sometimes doesn't say anything. Where the Torah says, Aaron said it, was going to say everything, and Moses was just going to put the words in Aaron's mouth. That's what God actually says. You tell Aaron what to say, and Aaron will say it. That's not what happens in the movies, and that's not what seems to happen in other parts of the Torah. Now, let me just throw this out, and again, it's probably the reason why we have this. The reason that we have Aaron taking such a primary role in this is because most likely it was a descendant of Aaron who wrote this text, a priest, a Kohen. And so Aaron is going to have a prominent role in the story, or at least a version of the story that Moses is obviously the person. You can't say Moses didn't do this stuff, but maybe Aaron had a much bigger role.
Who wrote this text or the Torah?
No, the Torah. No. The Aaron taking a role is written in a version of the Torah, a part of the Torah that most likely, I don't want to share it just because I don't want to lose this again. But I mean, the line in the Torah from this chapter says literally, after Moses says, send someone else, there is your brother Aaron the Levite. I know, speaks readily. Even now he is setting out to meet you. He will be happy to meet you. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth. I will be with you and with him as you speak, and tell both of you what to do. And he shall speak for you to the people. Thus he shall serve as your spokesman, with you playing the role of God to him. And take with you this rod, which you shall perform the signs. So in this version of it, it seems to be that the rod is secondary and that Aaron is primary, which is that Aaron is the one who's going to be speaking these things. Now, what's so weird about, well, we'll get to it in a second, because just keep in mind what I just told you the Torah says, specifically the words Aaron the Levite. Hold on to that for a second. You probably know where I'm going to go with that, but that's what the Torah said, Aaron the Levite. I like to show it because I want you to see it with your own eyes, but I don't want to lose the screen again. So just trust me that that's what verse 4:14 says. All right. So let's read what happens here with the Aaron, the way the Midrash brings this to life. And there's some interesting stuff here. Okay.
Furthermore, God spoke to Moses, saying, when I appeared to you the first time, you were meek and hid your face, not to see the vision. Whence comes now this effrontery of yours that you address me as a servant, as master? You speak too many words by far. Maybe you think I have no messengers, hosts, seraphim, ophanim, ministering angels, and Merkava wheels to send to Egypt to bring my children thence, that you say, send by the hand of him who thou wilt send. In truth, you deserve severe chastisement. But what can I do, seeing that I am the master of mercy? If you escape unpunished, you owe it to your father Amram, who rendered great services in behalf of the preservation of the Israelitish people in Egypt.
So here's God really losing it with Moses, saying, you don't think I know who I have to send? I mean, you came to me at the beginning of this discussion. You were hiding yourself and were scared, and now you're arguing with me? I know what I'm doing, and I should punish you now for your stubbornness. But I'm not going to, because your dad was really, really good and did a lot for us while you were slaves. Which again, we really don't know that. That's in the Midrash. We don't know anything about Amram. But the Midrash here is building on that, saying your dad is a good guy, and I'm going to let you alone for his sake. But I'm really, really done with you, because I don't know what to do. I can send an angel. I chose you. So here's what he says to him. This next section.
But Moses replied, O Lord of the world, I, a prophet and the son of a prophet, obeyed your words only after much hesitation. And I cannot expect Pharaoh, a wicked man, and the son of a wicked man, and the Egyptians, a disobedient people, and the sons of a disobedient people, to give ear to my words. O Lord of the world, you sent me to Egypt to redeem 60 myriads of your people from the oppression of the Egyptians. If it were a question of delivering a couple of hundred men, it would be a sufficiently difficult enterprise. How much severer is the task of freeing 60 myriads from the dominion of Pharaoh? If you had called upon the Egyptians to give up their evil ways soon after they began to enslave Israel, they might have heeded your admonitions. But if I should go and speak to them now, after they've been ruling over Israel these 210 years, Pharaoh would say, if a slave has served his master for 10 years and no protest has made itself heard from any quarter, how can a man conceive the idea of suddenly having him set at liberty? Verily, O Lord of the world, the task you put upon me is too heavy for my strength.
So here Moses' arguments are, it's not that you're asking, it's not what you're asking me to do, that like, it's the totality of everything you're asking me to do. And look at what you're asking me. You're not asking me to bring out a few dozen people. You're asking me to bring out 600,000 men. You're asking me to end not a decade of slavery, but hundreds of years of slavery. Like no one said anything for the last couple hundred years. And now you expect me to come there and say it's over? They've gotten very used to this. The Egyptians have gotten used to it. The Jews have gotten used to it. You can't have me upend this order. This isn't like some thing that just started. No, it's the scale of what you're asking me to do, God. And this, by the way, is a very, very human discussion that people have when they don't want to do something and when they really don't think they can do it. They look for those pieces of saying, well, I could do that normally, but I can't do that now, right? It's like when you ask somebody to do something, they go, look, if you'd given me 2 weeks, I could have done that. I can't do it in 2 days, right? It's the argument not that I can't do it at all. It's not possible. But given the circumstances, I can't do this. And and again, he says, look, the people may listen to me. And even with me, and I'm a good guy. He says, I'm a prophet and I'm the son of a prophet. So like we're good people. We're people that listen to God. That's our job. I didn't want to listen to you. How are the Egyptians going to listen? Because they've been not listening for a long time. So even in a good circumstance, what you're asking me to do is impossible. It's impossible given these circumstances. This is the challenge. Okay, I could maybe do this in this case, but I can't do it in this case. So that's what he's doing here with God. Too many people, too long. These people are just too wicked. Pharaoh's too wicked. He's bad. His father was bad. So it's not just that he's bad. He's got bad genes too. It's not just his nature and nurture are bad for him. He's doubly, there's no history of goodness in that guy. So it's like, this is just too much. I can't do it. It's too much. One of these things, maybe. Totality of it, can't do it. Now here's the next part of this kind of,
Moses said furthermore, I am not an eloquent man, nor can I see of what avail words can be in this matter. You are sending me to one who is himself a slave, to Pharaoh of the tribe of Ham, and a slave will not be corrected by words. I consent to go on your errand only if you will invest me with the power of chastising Pharaoh with brute force. To these words spoken by Moses, God made reply, let it not fret you that you are not an eloquent speaker. It is I that made the mouth of all that speak, and I that made men dumb. One I make to see, another I make blind. One I make to hear, another I make deaf. Had I willed it so, you had been a man of ready speech. But I desire to show a wonder through you. Whenever I will it, the words I cast into your mouth shall come forth without hesitation. But what you say about a slave, that he cannot be corrected by words, is true. And therefore I give you my rod for Pharaoh's castigation.
Yeah. So let's talk about the end first. Pharaoh is a child of Ham, and Ham are, according to Noah, they're slaves. And slaves won't learn anything unless they're being beaten. That's what it just said. He's from Ham, and a slave cannot be corrected by words. Slaves won't listen to words. You got to beat them. That's what we just read. So that's pretty troubling that there's this kind of admonition here that it doesn't help talking to a slave. You got to beat them. So that's what we just read. Moses is kind of, God will concede that point to Moses. But he says to Moses, look, if you can't speak well, I made you that way. And I make people the way I make them. And some people are blind and some people are deaf, and it's just the way I've made them. And so if these words come out of your mouth, maybe they'll look even more miraculous, right? Because if everyone knows you stutter, and all of a sudden, whenever you're speaking for me, you don't stutter, maybe this guy's got God. Maybe God is pulling the strings here, because I know that guy can't talk. Now he's talking very eloquently and beautiful words are coming out of his mouth. So here the teaching is that Moses is slow of speech, his speech impediment, his stutter, whatever happens to him when he tries to speak. When he's speaking for God, it's gone, which is another miracle. It's actually another example of God's miraculous use of in this case, someone's mouth. So it's another miracle. Let's read what it says here.
But Moses still stood his ground. He raised other objections. His grandchild, he said, is closer to a man than his nephew. Nevertheless, when Lot was taken captive, you sent angels to the aid of Abraham's nephew. But now, when the life of 60 myriads of Abraham's lineal descendants is at stake, you send me and not the angels. When the Egyptian bondwoman Hagar was in distress, you sent 5 angels to stand by her and to redeem 60 myriads of the children of Sarah. You send me. O Lord, send, I pray you, by the hand of him whom you will send in days to come. To this God answered, saying, I said not that I would send you to Israel, but to Pharaoh, and that one day that you made mention of, I will send to Israel at the end of days. Elijah will appear to them before the great and terrible day.
So let's dissect this midrash here. It's an interesting one. This little text is an interesting. It's got a lot of stuff in it actually for that one paragraph. Moses raises an objection to God. In other times, in other places in the Bible, you sent angels. You even sent angels to help out Hagar and Ishmael, who are the Egyptians. These are Egyptians. You sent angels to them to get them saved. For your people that are your people, you're sending me?
What and not for one person, for hundreds of thousands of people, you're sending me, a man, one man. Why don't you and that's what that phrase is. His grandchild is closer to a man than his nephew. The Jewish people are your people. Why are you sending a man when you sent an angel for these other people? That's his challenge. Don't send me, send an angel. Send it lots of angels. If you sent 5 angels to which we don't read in the Torah, but we do read an angel takes care of Hagar, who again is Egyptian. She gets an angel. The Jewish people don't get angels. And God says to Moses, no, I'm not sending you to Israel, but to Pharaoh. You're not really the redeemer of Israel. And more importantly, when it really counts, because of this, or maybe not, I mean, the takeaway from this is you don't want to do this, you can't do it. I'm going to send Elijah at the end of days. He's the one who's going to bring about the messianic era, not you, Elijah. Elijah actually has the really big job. Now, what's interesting about this is that Moses is the redeemer. I mean, we call him the redeemer of Israel. But here, Moses's rejection of this job, essentially, God takes him up on it and says, fine, your job is to punish Pharaoh. I'll take care of the redemption. You're not the redeemer. You're not the redeemer. You're the one who's chastising the Egyptians. So you don't want that other role? You don't want the role of redeemer? And again, it goes against our total understanding of Moses, because for the next 40 years, that's what he does. He helps redeem the people. He leads them. But leading them to Israel is different than redeeming them. God redeems them. God takes them out of Egypt. And that's one of the reasons why on Passover, we don't talk about Moses. We talk about God. We don't focus on God, the Redeemer. And if anything, who do we talk about at Passover? Elijah. The big redemption isn't going to be led by Moses or the spirit of Moses, whatever you want to say. It's being led by Elijah. So this is an interesting takeaway, that Moses essentially defers this role of being the redeemer, and God takes him up on it. God says the ultimate redeemer is not you. You're not really the redeemer. So that's a really, really interesting midrash, which basically says that Moses backed himself out of at least part of the job, and God took him up on it. Here we go.
If Moses refused to do the errand of the Lord, there was a reason. God had revealed to him the treasures of the Torah, of wisdom and of knowledge in the whole world's future. Now he beheld in the inner chamber of God rows of scholars and judges interpreting the Torah in 49 different ways as they sat in the court of hewn stones. And he saw besides Rabbi Akiva explaining the meaning of the crowns upon the letters. Then, said Moses, I do not care to be God's messenger. Let him rather send one of these great scholars. Then God ordered the angel of wisdom to carry Moses to a place of myriads of scholars, all interpreting the Torah and all making use of the formula, this is the halakha revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai. Now Moses recognized that even the greatest scholars of future generations would be dependent upon him. And then, at last, he was ready to execute the mission God desired to lay upon him.
Wow. This is a wonderful midrash. And it's really, 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 really wild. Right? This is a wild story. So, as we read about Moses at the burning bush, we read he gets to go to heaven, he gets to see the future, he gets to see the people getting the Torah, and he even gets to see people studying the Torah. And we have this midrash, or versions of this midrash, quite a few places in the Talmud and in different collections too, which is that Moses sees the rabbis 1,000 years later discussing the Torah and the halakha, the law. And he doesn't understand any of it. It's all like he walked into an advanced calculus or advanced physics, and he sees all these calculations on the big board, right? There's a big, picture that, right? The big board with all the formulas. And he's like, I have no idea what's on that wall. I don't understand what you're talking about. Can't even see the connection. I see letters and numbers. And that Moses sees that as he and hears it as he goes into the Beit Midrash, where he sees these scholars arguing. He doesn't understand it. And so he says to God, send one of these people. They like understand everything. I don't understand this stuff. But then he hears that each one of them says, this is the law from Moses on Mount Sinai. And he realizes that his place in this is so important, because without him, they can't do that. They won't have that knowledge if he doesn't do his job. And now he realizes that he has to do this. That again, as much as that's a very, kind of like self-aggrandizing, or kind of like it's kind of a selfish, egotistical reason to do it. He finally gets it, that everybody else is depending on him to do this job. And as much as he doesn't feel worthy enough of it, he now feels worthy enough because he knows how important his role will be in the future. So it's a really powerful recognition. Obviously, the rabbis are writing this about themselves and about their teachers. I mean, they didn't write it about their generation. They're writing about Rabbi Akiva and some of the great scholars who they admired. And remember, Rabbi Akiva started out, he was either a child of a descendant of a convert to Judaism, or he was a shepherd, or he was not very well grounded in the rabbinic tradition, and then decides, in his 40s, like Moses, essentially, to step up and take his place. He has that epiphany that, the Torah can, that's his calling, if you will. But he wasn't raised in it. And so Rabbi Akiva is almost like kind of their version of Moses, the rabbi's version of Moses. But Moses recognizes that without him, none of this stuff is possible. So it's a really beautiful midrash. This is an example of somebody realizing that even though they don't feel worthy, even though they don't feel that they're up to the task, even though they know they don't know as much as they should, if they don't get this started, none of the other stuff can happen. Somebody's got to put this in motion. And he finally realizes, you know what? I will, I'm okay. And even more so, I'm going to end up getting credit for this. So that's his moment of stepping forward. But there are consequences to what Moses does here. Here's what happens.
But Moses had to pay dear for having hesitated in the execution of the divine bidding. God said to him, "It was appointed that you should be priest, and Aaron should be a Levite. Because you have refused to execute my will, you shall be the Levite, and Aaron shall be priest." A punishment that did not fall upon Moses personally, but only upon his descendants, all of whom are Levites. As for himself, he performed a priest's service in the tabernacle.
Wow. As I said, in verse 14, it says, the Lord became angry with Moses, and he said, there is your brother Aaron the Levite. He, I know, speaks readily. Even now he is setting out to meet you, and he will be happy to see you. Now, Aaron's a Levite as much as Moses is a Levite, but we never call Aaron the Levite. He's never referred to as a Levite because he becomes the Kohen. He becomes the priest. What the rabbis just interpreted from that phrase, Aaron the Levite, was he was supposed to simply be a Levite. Moses was supposed to be priest. But because of this argument with God, he was punished. And he becomes the assistant. They say, well, during his lifetime, when the tabernacle was around, right? When the ark and the tabernacle was around, he got to be a priest. He did a priest's job. But his descendants, Moses's descendants, are Levites. They are only helpers to the Kohanim. So what Moses did was he essentially lowered the Levites, or not just the whole tribe, but specifically his descendants became merely Levites, whereas Aaron's sons became the Kohanim. It wasn't supposed to be that way, according to this Midrash. Moses' kids were supposed to continue on. Meanwhile, we don't know who Moses' kids are. We know who Aaron's kids are. We know who the Kohanim are. We don't know who Moses' family is. That's a pretty big punishment. So if anybody would say, well, did Moses get punished for arguing here with God? Oh, yeah. Oh, he got punished. More importantly, his descendants got punished. They lost their ability to be the ones in charge. So it's a pretty heavy duty thing here. The rabbis don't see this conversation as a achievement for Moses. This is his arguing with God. His refusal to take on this mission is not seen as for the most part, there's no benefit to this. There's no, well, look how he's, trying to be humble, and look how he's trying to. The rabbi saw in this argument someone who really didn't want to step up to the job, not just someone who's deferring and saying, you know what, I'm not worthy of it. He seems to try to find every reason not to do it, and they don't like it. They don't like Moses' behavior here really at all. And God asks you to do something, you do it. You say, well, I'm not worthy, but yeah, I'll do it. You don't say, I'm not worthy and I don't want to do it. And that's what Moses did repeatedly. And so he's punished. And more importantly, his descendants were punished. So not a good scene for Moses in the end. And again, the rabbis build on that because how many people get the opportunity to do what Moses did, to speak with God, to be able to be God's representative? To some extent, that's why they did what they did. I mean, the rabbis did what they did. They're craving this experience. They're craving the experience that Moses had where he's called on by God to do this. Something so big. And they don't like it because they wouldn't do that, or they'd hope they wouldn't do that. They're willing to concede, yeah, this is what I would do if God asked me to do this. But they're not willing to go down the road with Moses saying, yeah, I don't, send somebody else. They don't like that. And to some extent, every rabbi, I think, ever since has had this kind of envy of Moses. Everybody got that?
Yeah.
Some would call it Moses envy. I didn't make that up. Well, maybe I did make that up, but I've been saying it for a long time. Ever since I was a little kid, I had that Moses envy because to some extent I was given that name, and I said,
That's the legacy of following in that tradition of, again, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses being the ultimate teacher. You want to know that God is speaking to you. You want to know that you're doing God's work. And here's a guy that absolutely 100% knows he's doing God's work, and he doesn't want to do it. And so here's where we're confronted with, but why? You can understand Moses losing his temper later on in the story of Meribah. That we can kind of get. But not wanting to do this job when we're following in his footsteps, rabbis aren't really willing to cut him slack on that.
Is there a sense in which people who are called to the rabbinate argue with God? Not wanting that task?
Well, I would say that I would say that there is kind of a, this idea that there should be some element of hesitation or I mean, today we do it through a process of making it, a 5-6 year postgraduate degree to try to weed out people who really don't, can't or don't want to be up to the task. I mean, we go through psychological screening and somehow I passed that, but they we try to do our best to evaluate whether people are going to be able to do this. And so I would say within the non-Orthodox world, that's why most people can't really be ordained until they're at least 26 or 27 years old. So there's that. I mean, if you just look at I mean, if you're 21 or 22, even if you're like 20 when you graduate, you really couldn't finish rabbinical school before you're 25 or 26. So there's that level of maturity or understanding what you're doing. I think there's a lot of at the non-Orthodox seminaries, there's definitely an attempt to really try to make sure people know what they're in for, and very upfront kind of guidance and counseling on what kind of life people are in for. And I know for a fact, for me, it was, I had people telling me when I was 5 or 6, oh, you'll be a rabbi one day. And I literally thought that was something I wouldn't do. I couldn't do. And so I've talked about this before. I did feel in a lot of ways, these, who am I to do this? I'm not going to speak on behalf of God. I'm not, there was a lot of hesitation, which I think people in the rabbinic world, when they're looking at people for rabbinic jobs, men and women today, they really do a good grinding down of them before they do it. And I think to some extent, and I've talked about this with some people in the last 30 years, as women have entered the rabbinate, there's been a greater emphasis on people having a healthy family work balance because women demanded it. Men, we read last week that Moses becomes celibate once he's called. And the angels say to God, remember, that's not good. Men are not supposed to be cut off. And God says, well, he's already had kids, so he's now going to be with the Shekhinah. Remember that scene? So there is that understanding that, again, there was a possibility that as you got into rabbinic study, that you'd go off the deep end and never come out, that you would never emerge from your text. And so that was another issue, which is that can someone balance it? And so people had to have children before they kind of, became teachers, or really, even if they became rabbis, before they started teaching there was kind of this, well, let's make sure that they're going to have children, because they didn't want to have people cut off from procreating.
but there was definitely an understanding that, yeah, this is a possibility that somebody gets so wrapped up into godliness that they don't ever emerge, which is why the tradition was you were not supposed to study Kabbalah until you were well into your 30s, maybe even 40, before you started studying Kabbalah, because they didn't want people going down that rabbit hole and not coming out. Especially, again, they didn't have a chance to have kids. They become addicted and so wrapped, and I say the word addicted, they become so wrapped up into this lifestyle that they would never have a balance. So if anything, I think women have made that like almost expected, that there's a balance now between the rabbi and the congregation, the rabbi and the job, so to speak, that there was, but when I was a kid, this idea that I'd be a rabbi and feel like I was cut off from my family, from my community, live on a different existence, that scared the heck out of me. I didn't want to have that at all. And I actually was, when I sat down with my rabbi, who I know did not have a really good experience with his own trying to balance his family life, and I respected him and I liked him a lot. He was the one who actually pointed out to me in the first place, women have changed the dynamic. Essentially, it's too, he said, essentially it's too late for me, but don't worry about that. Because I said to him, I said, I don't want to have to live a life where I have to separate myself or live a separate life from my family. And he said, it doesn't happen as much anymore. So, and he thanked women in the clergy for changing that dynamic. It was too late for him, but not for me and for other people who are entering now. So interestingly, to answer your question again, there is no doubt that warning people away and encouraging them to be doubting, because again, it's still gonna upend your life. So yeah. So Moses's family essentially also by him gets cut off from any kind of role of leadership later on, interestingly. All right, the last paragraph.
Moses had said to God, "You have been speaking to me now these many days. Nevertheless, I am still slow of speech and of a slow tongue." For this, he received another punishment. God said to him, "I might change you into a new man and heal you of your imperfect speech, but because you have uttered such words, I refrain from curing you."
Wow.
Take
Wow.
that.
Wow. So if you had any doubt that God was pretty fed up with him by this point, yeah, I was going to cure you of that speech impediment you have, that was going away, but not now. So it's pretty wild that Moses is he doesn't catch any slack from this, at least in the rabbinic mind. He's the ultimate rabbi, and he doesn't seem to want to do the job. And again, it's not because he has the rabbis don't throw out, hey, look, he could have said, I have a comfortable life. I have this nice job as a shepherd. I'm not worried about Pharaoh killing me. None of that. It's that and that's not, by the way, what he says. Moses doesn't ground any of his deferral of this in, but that's not what I'm doing now, God. I have a different life. No, it's bad. And again, the rabbis even add that thing we read at the beginning, which is, God just showed you all the secrets. You can't back out now. You got to see that. That's not fair. Once you see that stuff, you're in. You've been taken behind the veil. You can't go back out. You're now one of God's chosen. You're doing his job. You can't back out now. So the fact that he got to see that and was then backing out is also part of it. And again, that's what we read the previous 2 weeks. His transference up to heaven and hell, his looking at paradise. You get to see all that. And by the way, the rabbis kind of lay out, after you see that, you should be in. That's pretty good guarantee that, hey, I'm going to be okay. I've got God behind me, and I got heaven to look forward to, and I know I'm in with God. But Moses, it doesn't work. And so that's why they have such an issue with him. And the Torah is the Torah. Again, part of the Torah's Moses, I wouldn't say Moses bashing, but Moses's this scene sets up Aaron. And if you're a priest, your ancestor Aaron gets elevated here. That could have been the purpose of it. Rabbis don't care about that. They only care that Moses is very reluctant. So now we're going to read in this last part of today, Moses finally going back to Egypt.
When Moses finally gave in and declared himself ready to go to Egypt as God's messenger, his acceptance was still conditioned upon the promise of God to fulfill all his wishes. And God granted whatsoever he desired except immortality and entering the Holy Land. God also allayed his fears regarding the danger that threatened him from his one-time enemies, Dathan and Abiram, on account of whom he had had to flee from Egypt. He told him that they had sunk to the estate of poor and insignificant men, bereft of the power of doing him harm.
Right. And so this is this idea that Dathan and Abiram were the ones who were originally narked on him, right? These are the Jewish capos who turned him into the Egyptians. And he says, nah, those guys are powerless now. Now, of course, we know that they later on become the leaders of the revolt against them. But God basically, oh, you'll be okay. No, you're not going to lead the people in. But by the way, here it says that Moses knew that before he even struck the rock. But God is going to tell him, don't be afraid of anything. You go back. Now, what do you do with Yitro?
Moses was loyal to the oath he had given his father-in-law Yitro, never to return to Egypt without securing his consent. His first concern, therefore, was to go back to Midian and obtain his permission, which Yitro gave freely. Then Moses could set out on his journey. He tarried only to take his wife and his children with him, which made his father-in-law say, "Those who are in Egypt are to leave it, and you desire to take more there?" Moses replied, "Very soon the slaves held in bondage in Egypt will be redeemed, and they will go forth from the land and gather at Mount Sinai and hear the words, 'I am the Lord your God.' And should my sons not be present there?" Yitro acknowledged the justice of Moses' words, and he said to him, "Go in peace, enter Egypt in peace, and leave the land in peace."
Yeah. Now, the line in verse 18 says indeed that after the next words after take this rod with which you will perform the signs, the next verse 18 says, Moses went back to his father-in-law Yether and said to him, "Let me go back to my kinsmen in Egypt and see how they're faring." And Yitro said to Moses, "Go in peace. Lech l'shalom." Now, the rabbis, of course, they made that lech l'shalom, vo l'shalom, lech l'shalom. They added to it, right? They embellished it. But it's a nice phrase, lech l'shalom, go in peace. But the rabbis basically say here that Moses had to ask him, because the Torah says he went back and asked him. And so the rabbis, we already heard this before when we first meet them, is when we first meet Yitro, that Moses promises Yitro that he'll never take his daughter away without asking for permission. So here he's now asked for permission. Okay, let me go. And he says, okay. But the rabbis had this conversation, which is Yitro says, "Why are you taking the kids? Don't take my grandkids," which I love, because he wants his grandkids. He doesn't want them to be in danger. He said, you're going down to Egypt. They're all slaves there. You're going to take my grandkids, and they're going to be really bad. It's going to be really bad for them there. And Moses' answer is,
my kids, your grandkids, but they're my kids. God is going to reveal at Mount Sinai. And you don't want my kids there? My kids shouldn't hear God say, I am the Lord, thy God, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, the words of the Ten Commandments. You don't, my kids shouldn't be at that holy moment. And so Yitro says, okay, go. Now, what's interesting about this, of course, is that according to chapter 19, Yitro shows up with Zipporah at that moment. So something happens. Something happens which we don't get in the Torah. But the Midrash just gave us this discussion that Moses clearly wants his sons to be at that moment at Mount Sinai, which is why we get it in chapter 19, Yitro. That's why it's called Yitro. Because if you recall, Yitro shows up in chapter 19 of Exodus with Zipporah and the family. He reunites the family. So at some point, the family splits, but we don't know when that happens. The Torah doesn't tell us. Midrash just gave us a little bit of that story. Here we go.
At last, Moses sallied forth upon his journey to Egypt, accompanied by his wife and his children. He was mounted upon the very ass that had borne Abraham to the Akedah on Mount Moriah, the ass upon which the Messiah will appear riding at the end of days. Even now, his journey begun, Moses was but half-hearted about his mission. He traveled leisurely, thinking, when I arrive in Egypt and announce to the children of Israel that the end of the term of Egyptian slavery has come, they will say, we know very well that our bondage must last 400 years and the end is not yet. But if I were to put this objection before God, he would break out in wrath against me. It is best for me to consume as much time as possible on the way there. God was.
So well, hold on a second. So let's just talk about this for a quick second. This magical donkey.
Yes.
This is quite a donkey because this donkey doesn't die.
Right.
This is not the ass of Bilam that he rides, because that ass, according to tradition, gets killed. And actually is the same jawbone of that ass that Samson uses to slay all those Philistines. That's a magic ass that has a magical mouth jawbone that the rabbis didn't want to lose, because it says Samson killed them with the jawbone of an ass, and we know that there's an ass that talks in the book of Numbers, so it's the same. We read that a long time ago in the Midrash. I don't expect you to know all about donkeys, but this one is a really special donkey in that it lasts for a long time and doesn't die, because it's still going to be around when the Messiah is riding this donkey into Jerusalem. Of course, this is an important story in Jesus' story, because anybody who's going to be the Messiah better be on that donkey when he rides into Jerusalem. And Moses gets to ride, according to this Midrash, on that same very ass. Abraham was on that ass to go up to Mount Zion, to Mount Moriah, which later is Mount Zion. This same place where it's all the same place, will be the same place, and it's all the same donkey. Abraham and the Messiah are both on that same donkey in that same place. Moses, though, gets to be on it right here on the way to Egypt, because it says that he's on the ass. It says he's, verse 20 says, Moses took his wife and sons and mounted them on an ass and went back to the land of Egypt, and Moses took the rod of God with him. Got to take that rod, the rod of God. It sounds much better in English. In Hebrew, it's Mateh HaElohim. It's the staff of God. But it does say there's a donkey there, so maybe it's the same one. How we get this night encampment story again, which we read a little bit before, from verse 24. We come back to it. At the night encampment on the way, the Lord encountered him and sought to kill him.
So Zipporah took a flint, cut off her son's foreskin, touched his legs with it, saying, "You are truly a bridegroom of blood to me." And when he let him alone, she added, "A bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision." And that's it. Those three verses, 24, 25, and 26. What is that crazy, crazy thing all about? Here's another Midrash on that.
God was ill-pleased with Moses for this artifice, and he spoke to him, saying, Joseph prophesied long ago that the oppression of Egypt would endure only 210 years. For his lack of faith, Moses was punished while he was on the road to Egypt. The angels Af and Hema appeared and swallowed his whole body down to his feet, and they gave him up only after Zipporah, nimble as a bird, circumcised her son Gershom and touched the feet of her husband with the blood of the circumcision. The reason why their son had remained uncircumcised until then was that Yitro had made the condition, when he consented to the marriage of his daughter with Moses, that the first son of their union should be brought up as a Gentile.
All right, so let's pause right there. The rabbis are dealing with a very mysterious story, which they didn't understand. They didn't understand. 100% they didn't understand.
Does anybody understand it?
We don't understand it, maybe even less. Well, there's an argument that we understand it a little bit more because we found some other texts in other cultures which seem to attest to these kinds of practices that maybe the rabbis just didn't understand from their cultural environment. But the fact that Moses gets attacked by God, they don't like that idea, but maybe he gets attacked by an angel. It's God's doing, but it's not God swallowing him up or attacking him. But this idea that he's swallowed by him is a very prevalent idea, that somehow this serpent or this divine being swallows up Moses up to his feet, and then finally, when she cuts off the foreskin and touches it to his feet, that this saves him. So according to this, Moses is being punished for doubting God. Like, 210 years later, what's going on? That's why he gets punished with this, why these angels come after him. I guess you could say that's, I don't know, maybe a reason for, his doubting. That's why he gets attacked. Look, there's a theory that it's because he killed somebody back in Egypt and he never paid the price for the murder. He's got blood on his hands. And the only way to get the blood off of his hands is to create a ritual that will cleanse him. There's a weird midrash. Moses had an agreement with his father-in-law that his oldest child would not be brought up Jewish. Holy moly. That seems like a crazy thing. I don't know what to tell you other than my guess is it happens sometimes. And people went through interfaith marriages that occasionally the agreement would be you don't bring your kids up Jewish, or you don't bring up one of the kids as Jewish. You bring up one way and one the other way. It happens sometimes nowadays, either intentionally or unintentionally. The parents will kind of say, well, let the kids do whatever they want to do. And sometimes, we have a few congregants who have that situation where their brother or sister was not raised, they were raised in the same house, but didn't pick Judaism, weren't given any
any Jewish training and just went in a different direction. So whether it was conscious or unconsciously decided, it happens. I mean, people obviously choose their own religions anyways, even if they're all raised Jewish, but there are cases where an interfaith or both parents are Jewish, but there are cases where, so these are all possibilities of what happened when the rabbis wrote these midrashim, how they lived. But again, this idea that Tzipporah saves the day is definitely something that the rabbis are on. And they even play off of her name, which means bird. And she's as nimble as a bird. She's quick as a bird. Because to circumcise your son and get all this thing done, touch the blood on his feet, all while this is going on, while Moses is being attacked, shows a very nimble, agile, very resourceful.
I think you froze.
Yeah, come back, come back. At least it's a nice face. You could be making a bad face.
Yes. Always happens. It's so crazy.
Rosemary, you read so well.
Oh, thank you.
It's just a pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I took advantage of the time I got on my exercise bike and had breakfast. So that's why I was.
That's good.
I guess.
Okay, well, bye, everybody.
Well, he might come back on. Francine's going to call him. Is that what she texted?
Okay. We'll see.
We
if
don't
he
have too
comes
many
back.
minutes left.
We have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, we got 15 minutes.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes after that.
Okay, he's back, sort of. Disconnecting.
Sorry, everybody.
Welcome
That's
back.
okay.
Yeah,
Gives us a chance to chit chat.
Yes.
you can see that sometimes when there's little tastes that we're going to have a problem when the screen sharing stops working really well. Sometimes that happens. I assume the screen is down, right?
Right. The screen is down. I'm looking at you.
Yeah, no, because now I'm on my phone. So I'm restarting the computer. We're going to read a little bit more, and then we're actually in a good place for us to. Actually, you know what? Let's wrap up there at the. It's going to take forever for this thing to restart. So we'll wrap up there with the text, but when we come back to it, we'll come back to Moses finally getting on the road. And again, the Midrash is really, really long on Moses at the burning bush. That chapter 3 and 4, which in the Torah, well, there are 2 chapters. In the Midrash, they go on for pages and pages. We've been reading them for weeks now. So yeah, it is a definite place where the rabbis find a whole lot of place for elaboration, to put it mildly. But there's stuff in here that we really need to know. I mean, there's stuff where the rabbis pick up on Moses's hesitancy, not just that not just that he's reluctant, but that he seems to not get what his mission, what his role in life is. And so that's why we spent so much time at that place. We spent weeks, 4 weeks at the burning bush, which again is pretty long though. I mean, in the Torah, it's 2 chapters. It's chapter 3 and 4. So it is a recognizable big enough narrative chunk that the rabbis do have grounds to elaborate on it in the Midrash, but this is a lot of text. This is a lot of text. And the dialogue and the debate that Moses has with God is only part of the story. It's the visions that he has. It's the lessons from before and looking ahead that we can take away from Moses's reluctance, and quite frankly, sets into motion the rest of Moses's life for the next 40 years, and to some extent, obviously, the history of the Jewish people, because Moses is not the final redeemer of the Jewish people. The Messiah, one could make the argument, one of the questions that the rabbis are getting at here is, why isn't Moses the ultimate redeemer? Why is Elijah the ultimate redeemer? Why is the Messiah from King David? Wouldn't you have Moses be the one that, assuming that somebody comes back and does this, assuming that this is assuming I'm talking about the messianic redemption, shouldn't it be Moses? Moses is the ultimate redeemer, you'd think. And so the rabbis really also do something here which is pretty significant, which is that they lay the groundwork for why Moses cannot be the ultimate redeemer. And it's this scene at the burning bush. It's his inability to step up and do his job, and the goading and all the work that God has to do in order to get him ready, which finally makes him not the final redeemer. And again, you could make the argument, isn't that the biggest job? The biggest job is yet to come. The most important job is to be the final redeemer, not the one who redeems us out of Egypt, but the one who redeems us from life and existence as we know it. And it's not Moses. So that's also part of what the agenda is here, is to make you understand why Moses is not the Messiah, and why the Messiah is not from Moses, is not even from the Kohanim, is not even a priestly Messiah. It's a descendant of David. So it is why Moses is not Jesus. And it's one of the reasons why, again, as much as people looked to Jesus for comparisons, the comparison to Moses was not as important as you'd think it would be, because it wasn't as important for Jews. It wasn't important to Gentile Christians, but it really wasn't even important to Jews, whether Jesus was the next coming of Moses. You don't see it. You really don't, which is a perfect segue to wish everyone here a good next couple of days, to wish Reverend Lynn a very joyous and Merry Christmas. And again, when we recreate the Midrash of those people bringing gifts, it's a great Midrash, by the way. It's a great lesson of the world coming together, and all those languages or all those peoples being brought together, because those three sons represent Shem, Ham, and Yafet. Those three sons represent the sons of Noah that represent the whole world. So it's very Midrash. Those I love those guys. Gaspar, Balthazar. What's the other?
Melchior.
Yeah, Melchior. I love those representations. And by the way, they're almost always, a really dark, those three guys, right? There's almost always one of those guys has to be, but there should be one that's Asian. There should be one that's Indian or whatever. There should definitely represent the totality of the three sons of Noah, the B'nai Noah. But it's very midrashic. It's very, very much in those styles of the rabbis.
The whole Jesus thing is midrashic.
Yeah. But I always love that part of those stories where you see those elements, and the more you know about the Midrash, I love that. I love those embellishments, which were very, very rabbinic and very midrashic.
You have to wait till January 6th.
That's right.
They don't come until January 6th.
for the bris, yeah. But again, as we saw the star, we saw that story in the birth of Moses. But again, even though those similarities exist, it's not setting Jesus up as the next Moses. It really wasn't. As much as he teaches and does those things, the expectations aren't, that he has to be the next Moses. I mean, there's the Sermon on the Mount, no doubt, very important midrashic story, but it is not. It's not that he has to be the next Moses. It is really more important that he is the, if you will, he is the holder of that responsibility that Moses essentially, as we just saw, abdicated, which is to be the Messiah, to be more like the Elijah or more like the Davidic king, rather than the Moses lawgiver. And you see it in the Christian Bible, and you see it in the representations. Again, it's not a little bit there, but the expectation wasn't that Jesus had to be Moses, because the rabbis essentially took that away from Moses.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Have a good one. Stay safe.
Good week.
Stay healthy.
Merry Christmas,
Bye-bye.
Reverend Lynn.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
What's going on here? Oh my goodness.